The chandeliers at Whitmore Hall burned with the cold brightness of 100 candles, and General Arthur Bennet stood where he always stood at these affairs, against the far wall near the doors, where a man could see the entire room without being seen to look. He was 41 years old. He had fought at Cold Harbor and Spotsylvania, had commanded the retreat at the Wilderness with 300 men, and brought 268 of them home. He had sat across negotiating tables from men who wanted him dead and spoken to them, with the same measured civility he used now, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing tray and not drinking it. Washington society had decided years ago that General Bennet did not dance. It had become a kind of legend, the way all his silences became legend, the silence before battle, the silence in testimony before the Senate Committee on Military Affairs, the silence he offered instead of opinion when politicians made speeches at dinner tables. He was a man, the papers said, carved from colder stone than other men. He was, certain hostesses whispered, with a particular mixture of admiration and frustration, simply not made for ballrooms. He was made, he would have said if anyone asked directly, for assessment. And what he was assessing tonight from his position beside the east door was the woman across the room who did not know he was watching. Mrs. Clara Ashby stood near the edge of the music, close enough to hear it, far enough from the dancers to make clear she understood her place. She was 32 years old, a widow of 4 years, and she worked as governess to the Langley children on Massachusetts Avenue. She wore a grey dress the colour of winter sky, not mourning, not quite, but subdued in the way a woman wears subdued colours when she has learned not to draw attention to herself. Her hair was dark, her posture was excellent. She was speaking with a quiet animation to Mrs. Langley's cousin, a woman of no particular standing, and the thing that struck Bennet, the thing that had struck him consistently for 4 months, was the way she listened. Most people in rooms like this listened the way they drank watered champagne, perfunctorily, because the alternative was silence, and silence at a gala required explanation. Clara Ashby listened as if the other person was the only person in the room. He had noticed it the first time at the Langley dinner in August, where she had been present in the subordinate way governesses were present at such things, near the children at the beginning, near the background at the end, never quite at the table, never quite dismissed. He had found himself positioned, through some accident of seating arrangement, within conversation distance of her for approximately 20 minutes before the men withdrew for brandy. 20 minutes. He had learned in 20 minutes that she had read Tocqueville, that she had opinions about the Army's reconstruction policy that were more coherent than those of 3 generals he could name, that she used no flattery whatsoever, and that when he said something she disagreed with, she said so without apology and without performance. He had gone home that evening and sat in his study for a long time, not reading. 4 months later, they had spoken perhaps a dozen times. Brief conversations at the edges of functions he attended because Washington required it, and she attended because the Langley family brought her. They had exchanged no letters, no private meetings, nothing that could be named or held up as evidence of anything. He was being very careful about evidence. He knew, with the tactical clarity that had kept him alive through 4 years of war, exactly what he was doing and what it would cost, and he had not yet decided whether the cost was one he would ask her to share. He watched her laugh at something her companion said, a real laugh, not the performed variety, and he felt the thing he always felt in these moments, which was a kind of exquisite restraint, pressure behind glass. He adjusted his gloves and did not move from his position. He did not see Miriam Hartley approach her. Clara had been told when she first came to work for the Langleys that Washington society was simply Philadelphia society, with higher ceilings and sharper elbows. She had found this largely accurate. The currencies were different, political alliance rather than old money, proximity to power rather than bloodline, but the mechanics of exclusion were identical. She had made her peace with it. She had made her peace with a great many things in 4 years of widowhood, in the particular arithmetic of a woman who had been left with a name but no fortune, with education but no independent income, with dignity but no platform from which to exercise it. She liked the Langley children. She liked her small room on the 3rd floor with its window overlooking the garden. She liked that her days had purpose, and her evenings, when she was occasionally included in social functions as a kind of extension of the Langley household, offered her the strange small pleasure of being in rooms where interesting things were discussed, even if she was not quite a participant in the discussion. She liked, and this she held quietly without examination, the 20-minute conversations at the edges of events. She liked a particular quality of attention that she had encountered exactly once, from a man who listened to her the way she tried to listen to everyone else, who looked at her when she disagreed with him, as if disagreement were information rather than offense. She was not building anything from this. She was too practical for that. She simply noted it the way she noted good weather, with appreciation, without expectation. She did not see Miriam Hartley until the woman was 2 feet away. Mrs. Hartley was 53, well-dressed, and had the particular energy of a person who managed social architecture the way some men managed stock portfolios, strategically, with attention to yield. Her daughter had been angling for the general's attention since October. Clara knew this the way servants knew everything, from peripheral observation, from the way sound carried through large rooms. She did not think it her business. "Mrs. Ashby," Miriam Hartley said, with a warmth that Clara recognized immediately as the wrong temperature for genuine warmth. "How lovely that the Langleys bring you to these things." "They're very generous," Clara said. She kept her voice even. "I imagine it must be such a relief." Mrs. Hartley tilted her head. "To be included, I mean, given your situation." Clara looked at her. "My situation is quite comfortable, thank you." "Of course, though," a small pause precisely calibrated, "I did hear the most interesting thing, that you've been positioning yourself rather cleverly near the general at these events." The smile did not move. "I do hope you're not entertaining any aspirations, dear. He has a great deal to offer, and men like that attract a particular sort of attention. From women who find his prominence—" Another pause, a glance up and down that managed to take in the grey dress, the simple hairpin, the lack of jewels, convenient. The music swelled slightly, covering a moment of silence. Clara felt it, the familiar tight calculation of a woman who has learned to measure the cost of responses. To speak was to be accused of defensiveness. To stay silent was to concede the field. To leave was to give the room a picture of a woman in retreat. She was trying to decide between 3 poor options when she heard it. The quality of the room changed. It was a physical thing almost, the slight shifting of attention that moved through a ballroom like wind through grass. People turned, conversations paused. Clara followed the movement with her eyes to its source and found General Arthur Bennett crossing the floor toward her. He was not the tallest man in the room. He did not need to be. There was something in the way he moved, contained, deliberate, with the particular economy of a man who had learned that every action in an enemy's sightline carried consequence, that made the crowd part without his having to ask it. He stopped in front of them. He looked at Mrs. Hartley with the expression Clara had come to privately think of as his assessment face, not hostile, not warm, simply recording. "Mrs. Hartley," he said. "General." Something flickered behind the woman's eyes, recalculation. "We were just—" "I know what you were doing," he said. Quiet, precise, no elaboration. Mrs. Hartley's mouth opened and closed. Bennett turned to Clara. And now Clara saw something she had not seen in any of their previous conversations. Not the controlled assessment, not the careful attention. Something less managed. Something that looked, for the space of a breath, like a man who had made a decision. "Mrs. Ashby," he said, "will you dance with me?" The music was a waltz. It had been a waltz for approximately 30 seconds, which meant that somewhere in the architecture of the evening, this had either been extraordinary timing or something else entirely. Clara looked at him. She was very good at reading the real condition of things beneath their surface. She read his face for a long moment. "You never dance," she said. "No," he agreed. He extended his hand. He was wearing gloves, white, perfectly fitted. "I haven't found sufficient reason." The room was absolutely quiet in the way only large rooms can be quiet, with the noise of 50 people collectively holding their breath. Clara took his hand. He had not planned it. That was the truth he would examine later in the honest privacy of his study, with a glass of whiskey and no audience. He had seen Miriam Hartley's expression, had read it across 30 feet of crowded ballroom with the same facility he read tactical maps, and something in him had moved before the decision had formed. He had not planned the dancing. He had planned very little tonight except to observe from a distance and to go home at a reasonable hour and to continue being careful. He was not being careful anymore. She fit against him with the precision of someone who had been properly taught and never quite had occasion to use the lesson. A little stiff at first, Not from nervousness, he thought, but from the same deliberate management he practiced himself, feeling her way through an unexpected situation, taking its measure. He kept the distance appropriate, his hand at her waist, her hand in his, her chin level, her eyes meeting his without the downward cast that most women employed when they were overwhelmed or performing being overwhelmed. "You're going to be talked about," she said quietly. They were moving now, and the waltz had resumed around them, other couples returning to motion with the slight jerkiness of people who had interrupted themselves. "Yes," he said, "your reputation is not diminished by dancing with an intelligent woman." He turned them gently through a corner. "It might be enhanced by having taste." She made a small sound that might have been a laugh that she'd caught. "That's a very elegant way to frame what you just did." "What did I just do?" She looked at him, direct, unperformed. "You intervened." "I danced." "You knew what you were doing." "Yes," he said. No hedging, no circumnavigation. He had learned from somewhere that she valued the real answer. "I did." They moved through half a measure in something that was not quite silence. "I didn't need rescuing," she said. Her voice was even, but he heard the thing beneath it, not anger. Something more careful. Pride, perhaps, and the particular dignity of someone who had managed her own crises for long enough to feel territorial about the management. "I know," he said. "That's not what this was." "What was it?" He looked at her. The chandeliers turned above them. The music moved through its progression. Around them 50 people were watching and pretending not to watch, which was fine. He had performed under observation for 2 decades. He had learned to use it. "It was me," he said, "being less patient than I intended to be." She absorbed this. He could see her absorbing it, the careful intelligence working through the statement, testing its edges. That's a remarkable admission from a man known for patience. "I'm known for a great many things I'm reconsidering," he said. The waltz resolved. They slowed. They stopped as protocol required, with appropriate distance restored. He held her hand one moment longer than necessary, barely, a single breath's worth, before releasing it. "Thank you," he said, "for the dance." "Thank you," she said, "for the reason." He inclined his head and walked back to his position by the east wall. He did not look at Miriam Hartley. He did not look at the room of watching faces. He looked once back at Clara Ashby, who had returned to conversation with her companion with a composure that he recognized as the same material his own composure was made of, built over years, tested under pressure, genuine. He picked up his champagne and drank it for the first time all evening. The whispers organized within 48 hours. He had expected 2 weeks. He had underestimated the efficiency of winter, when the social calendar contracted and gossip needed less distance to travel. By the Thursday following the Whitmore Gala, 3 households had reportedly questioned Mrs. Langley about her governess's ambitions. By Friday, an anonymous notation in the society column of the Washington Ledger had observed with the particular delicacy of anonymous notations that a certain celebrated general had been seen dancing for the first time in recorded memory, and that his partner had been a woman whose qualifications for the distinction were, to put it delicately, difficult to identify. Clara read it. She read it in the small sitting room off the Langley nursery, with a cup of tea going cold beside her, and she read it twice to make sure she understood its architecture. Then she folded the paper and set it aside and went back to preparing the children's morning lesson. She was not surprised. She had not been surprised since she was 24 years old, and learned that the world applied different rules to women who stepped out of their designated positions than to the men who invited them to do so. What surprised her 3 days later was the card. It arrived with the Morning Post, addressed in a hand she had not seen before, precise, spare, military in its efficiency. A calling card inside and 3 lines below the printed name. "If you're willing, Thursday morning. There is a coffee house on G Street that is quiet at that hour, 9 o'clock. A.B." She held it for a long time. Then she wrote back 2 lines on the plain notepaper she used for household correspondence. "Thursday, 9 o'clock. C.R." He arrived before her. He had done the same thing she would do later, which was note this fact and what it meant, then set the analysis aside. He was in civilian clothes, a dark coat, no insignia, no visible indication of rank. He wore his gloves as always, and when she sat down across from him, he ordered coffee for both of them, without asking, because he remembered from a conversation in September that she took it black. She noticed that he remembered. You've seen the ledger, he said. It was not a question. And 3 other publications, she said. The Chronicle was more creative. They didn't name either of us, but the description was thorough. Something moved in his jaw, controlled. I owe you an apology. She looked at him across the coffee cups. Do you? I moved without thinking about the consequences to you. You moved without thinking about consequences to yourself, she corrected. You've thought about the consequences to me. That's a different thing. She wrapped her hands around her cup. I'm not angry with you. You should be. I'm practical, she said. Anger requires a target, and the target isn't you. A pause. The target is the system that makes a woman's reputation a tool for other people to use. He was quiet for a moment, looking at her. The coffee house was sparse at this hour. An older man with a newspaper near the window, a young woman writing letters at the back table. No one who would notice or care. They're going to escalate, he said. He set down his cup with the precise deliberation she had noticed from their first conversation. A man who measured every action's weight. Hartley's husband has political ambitions I've declined to support. My dancing with you gives him a narrative he can use. The general's judgment is compromised. The general is distracted. The general is interested in his governess, she said plainly. He looked at her. Yes. The word fell into the space between them without softening. He had decided, she realized, to be direct, to match the directness she had offered him since August. And are you, she said, interested? I've been interested since 20 minutes into a dinner party, he said. When you told me the Army's reconstruction policy was well-intentioned and structurally incoherent, and you were entirely correct. That's a very specific memory. I have a specific memory. It's professionally useful. The corner of his mouth moved. In this context, it's something else. She looked at her coffee. She looked at him. She thought about grey dresses and borrowed standing and the careful architecture of a life built on dignity alone, without the reinforcing structures that money or title or family connection provided. She thought about what it meant to want something from a position of structural disadvantage. She thought about how clearly she could see all of this, and how clearly he could probably see it too. I want to be honest with you about something, she said. Please. What you did at the gala, the dancing, it matters to me. Not because it rescued me, because you saw what was happening, and you responded with something public, which is a different quality of action from a private sympathy. She met his eyes. That kind of honesty is rare. I have learned not to trust it immediately. That's sensible, he said. I'm not rejecting it, she said. I'm telling you where I am. He nodded slowly. He reached up and removed his right glove, a small movement unhurried, and set it on the table. She looked at it. She looked at his bare hand, the scar along the outer edge of his palm that she had not noticed before. I commanded a cavalry unit, he said, that retreated across a burning bridge. The last man across caught my hand as the railing gave way. He turned his palm slightly. I don't generally take these off in public. She understood. He was telling her the only thing that mattered, that he was here unguarded, offering the real version. Then I'll tell you where I am as well, she said. I'm 32 years old. I'm a widow. I have $240 in savings, a position that depends on the goodwill of my employers, and a reputation that is, apparently, currently being managed by people with other agendas. She kept her voice level. I have learned to want very few things because wanting things from positions of weakness is its own particular education. A pause. I want this, whatever this is, to be real, or I would rather not have it at all. He looked at her for a long moment. It's real, he said simply, no elaboration. She nodded. She picked up her coffee. He picked up his glove and did not put it back on. They talked for 2 hours, about Tocqueville, about the construction of fair governance, about what it meant to hold authority responsibly, about coffee and why it mattered, which made him smile, a genuine one, complete, and she stored it the way she stored everything essential. When they left, they went in separate directions, as was practical. She did not tell herself it was nothing. She was done telling herself that. The man who came to destroy her reputation had a name she learned in January. Senator Harold Voss, no relation, was a careful man of 57 who had spent 30 years building a political architecture that depended, in part, on General Bennett's absence from its deliberate structure. Bennett's influence in military procurement, in veteran advocacy, in the quiet but consistent pressure he applied on Senate committees, had blocked 3 of Voss's preferred appointments in the past 2 years. Voss had been waiting for the right pressure point. He found it. The article appeared in the National Register on a Tuesday morning in January, signed by an investigative correspondent named R.P. Ellison, and it was more sophisticated than the Ledger's anonymous notation. It was a story. It had structure. It told in careful and plausible detail of a governess who had cultivated the attention of Washington's most prominent military figure, who had positioned herself strategically at social functions over a period of months, who had, and here the language became notably careful, taken advantage of a man whose war trauma had left him perhaps susceptible to a certain kind of sympathetic feminine influence. It named her. It named her employer. It cited, with no attribution, 2 unnamed sources who had observed the general appearing distracted at military briefings since the autumn. Clara read it at the kitchen table of the Langley household before the family rose. She read it twice. Then she put on her coat and walked to G Street. He was not at the coffee house. She had not expected him to be. It was a Tuesday, not a Thursday. She wrote him a note from a stationer's shop 2 blocks away and had it sent by a street boy, which was not dignified but was efficient. And then she walked back and began the children's lessons and did not let her hands shake. He came in person at 4:30 to the Langley front door and asked to speak with Mrs. Ashby on a matter of household business, a request that was plausible enough that the maid showed him to the small front parlor without visible suspicion. Clara came down in 3 minutes. He was standing by the window in his coat, gloves in his left hand, not wearing them. She noted this. "I've read it," he said. "I assumed." "It's Voss," he said. "I've been working against his preferred military procurement appointments for 18 months. He's been looking for leverage." His jaw was tight. "I should have moved sooner against him. I didn't anticipate that he'd move laterally." "Through me," she said. "Through you." He looked at her. Something in his face that she was learning to read as the emotion beneath the management, the thing he did not expose easily. "I'm sorry. I told you this was real, and then I let you become the cost of my politics." "You didn't let me," she said. "You didn't engineer this, Voss did." "I still—" "General." His title, deliberate. She watched him still. "We can apportion responsibility after. Right now I need to know what you intend to do." He looked at her for a moment. Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but opening. Recognition. "The Republican Gala," he said. "The Belmont fundraiser, 2 weeks." "I know it." Every significant political figure in Washington would be present. It was the largest gathering of the winter season, the event around which the entire social calendar revolved. "I'm going to end this publicly," he said, "in the room where it will matter most." He held her eyes. "But I need you to be there. And I need you to trust me for 2 weeks. "Mrs. Langley may not keep me for 2 weeks," she said quietly. 3 board members of her husband's firm have already sent their regards, which means they've read the article. "I've already spoken with Langley," he said. "This morning." She stared at him. "You spoke with my employer." "I told him the article was politically motivated defamation, that I was taking steps to address it publicly, and that any household that retained you would have my personal appreciation." He met her eyes without flinching. "Your position is secure." The thing she felt was complicated. She identified gratitude and discomfort in equal measure, and beneath them something that was neither, something warmer and less manageable. "You should have asked me first," she said. "You're right," he said immediately. "No defense. I should have. I moved quickly and without consultation." "You're used to commanding," she said. "Yes, and you're used to managing your own affairs." He held her gaze. "I'll do better. Tell me what you need from me for the next 2 weeks." She thought about it. Really thought. The way she thought through the children's lessons, practically with attention to actual conditions. "Tell me what you're planning," she said. "Not after, as you plan it. I want to understand the strategy." "Yes," no hesitation. "And then, at the Belmont, whatever you do, do it standing next to me. Not in front of me, not on my behalf, from a distance." She met his eyes. "With me." He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face changed, the last remnant of the managed professional distance, the thing he had kept between them even at the coffee house, finally gone. "Yes," he said. He put out his hand, not the gloved one. She looked at it and then she took it, and they stood in the Langley front parlor in the January light, like 2 people who had stopped pretending they weren't holding on. The 2 weeks were not quiet. The Register published a follow-up piece. Two of Washington's more prominent hostesses declined to include Mrs. Ashby in invitations extended to the Langley household. An anonymous letter arrived at the Langley address, suggesting, with unctuous concern, that the presence of a governess with uncertain moral standing might reflect upon the children's upbringing. Clara read each development with the even attention she had learned in hospital wards, where catastrophe was information rather than occasion for collapse. She and Bennett met twice more at the coffee house on G Street. He told her his plans. She asked questions and pushed back on two elements, and he changed them. And the thing that happened in those conversations, the particular quality of two intelligences working a problem together, was, she thought, the most intimate thing she had encountered in 4 years of widowhood. He told her on the second Thursday that he had been in 31 empty rooms before he found her in the first one. She told him she had lost count of the dinners she had attended in the conditional way of women at the edges of other people's tables, present but not quite. He took off his gloves. She reached across the table and touched the scar on his palm lightly, the way she had once checked wounds for heat, with professional attention that was also something else entirely. "Does it still hurt?" she asked. "No," he said, and then, honestly, "not the way it used to." She returned her hand to her coffee cup. He put his gloves in his pocket rather than back on. They walked out into the February cold in the same direction for the first time. The Belmont Republican Gala occupied 3 floors of the Willard Hotel and drew 400 guests. Clara arrived with the Langley family, as she had arrived at events for 2 years, in the subordinate position she had learned to wear with enough grace that it didn't feel like diminishment. Tonight it felt different. She wore the dark green dress she had been saving. Not emerald, not ostentatious, simply a color that was hers rather than borrowed from her situation. She did not see him immediately. She felt the room's attention before she saw its cause. The slight tidal shift of people turning, conversation's brief lull, the same quality she had felt at the Whitmore Gala. She looked toward the entrance and found Bennett crossing toward the center of the room, not toward the edges. He was in full dress uniform tonight, the dark blue with the gold braid, the medals across his chest, the complete formal presentation of his rank and record. He wore it the way he wore everything, as though it were simply the truth of him rather than performance. He was looking for her. She saw the moment he found her, the slight settle in his posture, the direction-finding of a man who has been orienting toward a fixed point. Senator Voss was near the northeast corner of the room, holding court with 3 colleagues. Clara had identified him from the social pages. He saw Bennett enter. She watched Voss watch Bennett, the calculation moving across the older man's face. She watched Voss see where Bennett was heading. Senator Harold Voss moved first, intercepting Bennett's path with the smooth efficiency of a man practiced in political blocking. He extended a hand. "General, excellent to see you. I was hoping we might have a moment." "We will," Bennett said. He shook the hand. "After." Voss blinked. "After what?" But Bennett was already moving, and the room was already watching. And the answer became evident in the way all answers at these events became evident, publicly, without possibility of revision. He stopped in front of Clara. He was close enough that the conversation would not carry, but the image would. The general in full dress uniform, medals and rank, and all the structural authority Washington had invested in him for 20 years, standing in front of a woman in a dark green dress near the edge of the room. "Clara," he said. "Arthur," she said, his given name the first time in public. She felt it land. He reached into his left breast pocket and removed his gloves. He had not been wearing them. He held them for a moment, then extended his other hand, the bare one, the scarred one. "Walk with me," he said. She took his hand. They walked together toward the center of the room, not hurriedly, not with performance, the way 2 people walk when they have decided something. Senator Voss, she noted from the edge of her vision, had gone very still. Bennett guided them to the slight rise near the orchestra platform, where the room's geometry naturally created a sightline for the assembled guests. He turned. He addressed the room without raising his voice, because he had never needed to raise his voice. "I want to address something directly," he said. The musicians, perceiving something, let the music settle. The room's attention gathered. "There has been a story in circulation, several stories, concerning Mrs. Clara Ashby and my relationship with her. These stories suggest that Mrs. Ashby has behaved improperly or manipulatively, and that my judgment has been compromised by her influence." The room was absolutely silent. "These stories are false," he said. "They were manufactured by people who found that the most efficient way to undermine my political positions was to attack a woman who had done nothing to deserve it." He held Voss's gaze from across the room. It was not a long look. It was specific. Voss looked away first. "I want to be clear about the real situation." He looked at Clara, the full weight of his attention, which was considerable, entirely on her. "Mrs. Clara Ashby is a woman of exceptional intelligence, integrity, and professional capability. She has managed herself throughout this manufactured crisis with a dignity that I have tried to match and frequently not managed." Something moved in his face, not public, not performed, simply present. "She has been since August the clearest thinking person I've encountered in 20 years of navigating rooms like this one." He turned his gaze back to the room. "I intend to ask her to marry me," he said. "I am telling this room first because the people in this room created the conditions that required telling, so that there is no confusion. This is not the general being manipulated by an ambitious woman. This is the general informing you that he has found someone worth the announcement." A pause. "I hope that's clear." It was, by any measure, the longest speech he had given in a social setting in recorded memory. Clara stood beside him, with him, as she had asked, and felt the room rearrange itself around the information the way rooms do when the power in them shifts. She saw Mrs. Hartley's expression. She saw Voss's expression. She saw to her left Senator Aldrich cover something with his champagne glass that might have been a smile. She looked at Bennett. He was looking at her, just her. "You told the room before you told me," she said quietly. "I know." Something in his eyes that she recognized as his version of apology, direct, unevasive, offering itself. "I should have done it the other way. I moved quickly again." "You did," she said. "I'll ask you properly," he said. "Not here, somewhere quiet, without an audience, with my gloves off." His hand in hers tightened slightly. "If you're willing to wait another half hour." She looked at him. She thought about coffee houses on G Street, about a blanket on her shoulders at 3 in the morning, about a man who had sat in 31 empty rooms and told her so, quietly, without decoration, about all the careful folded days of the past 4 years and what it meant to unfold them deliberately, with full knowledge of what the world would do with that information. "I've been managing alone for 4 years, she said. "I know," he said. "I'm very good at it." "I know that too." "I'm not willing to stop being good at it." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to." His thumb moved against her hand, barely a small motion. "I'm asking if you'll be good at it with someone who will at least try not to act without consulting you first." The orchestra, reading the room with the instinct of professional musicians at political functions, began a waltz. Clara looked at him. She felt with the particular clarity of a practical woman who had learned not to want things carelessly, that she wanted this. Not despite the cost, not in ignorance of the architecture, with full knowledge of it, in clear light, as an actual choice. "You should ask me properly," she said. "Half an hour," he said. "There's a small sitting room off the east corridor. I checked this morning." "Of course you did." The corner of his mouth moved. She walked with him onto the floor. He danced with the same controlled precision he brought to everything, and she matched him, and the room watched, and she didn't care about the room. "You're not terrible at this," she said. "I've had occasion to practice," he said, "since December." She looked at him. "You've been practicing." "Privately," he said. "I decided in October that I was going to ask you to dance eventually. I thought I should be capable of doing it without embarrassing you." She stared at him. The idea of this man, this deliberate, tactical, decorated man, practicing a waltz in private, in anticipation of a moment that might not have come because he had decided to be ready for it. "Arthur," she said. "Clara." "That is possibly the most romantic thing I have ever heard." "It was practical," he said. "It was both," she said. His expression did something she had not seen it do in any social setting in 4 months of watching. It opened, fully, without the glass between, without the management. She saw the man beneath the general, tired from 20 years of tactical caution, deeply private, somewhat rigid in his self-expectations, genuinely entirely present. She smiled at him, the kind she didn't use for rooms. He smiled back, the complete one. The sitting room off the east corridor was small and quiet, with a window that looked out on a winter garden and 2 chairs that faced each other. He had checked it that morning. She noticed that he had also, impossibly, left a small pot of coffee on the side table, still warm. She looked at it. She looked at him. "I spoke to the hotel's kitchen staff," he said. "I asked them to have it ready." "You planned this." "I plan everything," he said. "That's how I know it's real. I planned for the possibility that you would say no. I planned for the possibility that you would need time. I planned for the possibility that this conversation would need to be repeated in a different form on a different evening." He held her eyes. "I've been planning around you for 6 months, and I'm prepared to do it for the rest of my life if that's what you require." She sat down. She poured 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and kept the other, and they sat across from each other, which was where this had always been, and she waited. He took off his gloves, both of them. He set them on the table between them and folded his bare hands around his cup. "Clara Ashby," he said, "I have been in too many empty rooms to count. I have managed this city's politics for 20 years with a thoroughness I believe in and a loneliness I have not admitted to anyone, including myself, until this past autumn." He looked at her. "You think clearly. You speak honestly. You refuse flattery and you return directness. And when you disagree with me, you say so without apology, and you're usually right." "Not usually," she said. "Often enough," he said. "Often enough that I should be consulting you more systematically." A pause. "That is, I think, what I'm asking. Not only to marry me, to be the person I consult, the person in the room who is honest, the person—" He stopped. He looked at his hands, then back at her. "The person I come home to, if you're willing." She looked at him. She thought about everything she had come to know about him, the deliberateness, the patience with its specific breaking points, the way he remembered what mattered to people, the scar on his palm and what it meant that he showed it, the 31 empty rooms, the waltz practiced in private, the coffee still warm on a side table in a sitting room he had checked that morning. She thought about what she had told him. Real, or I would rather not have it at all. This was real. "Yes," she said, "I'm willing." He breathed, a single controlled exhale that carried more relief than she had ever heard from him. "Good," he said. He reached across the table and covered her hand with both of his, the scarred one, the bare one, held it the way a man holds something he has been afraid of losing and has stopped being afraid. "Good." She looked at their hands on the table. She looked at the coffee growing gently cool between them, which was, she thought, appropriate, the small practical detail of a real thing. "You practiced the waltz in private," she said. "Yes." "For 6 months." "Since October," he said. "I told you I decided in October." "You were that certain." "I was that hopeful," he said. "The distinction precise. Certainty is different. Certainty is what I feel now." She looked at him. The man who had stopped performing and started being present here in this quiet room, with his gloves off and his coffee cooling and no audience to require anything of him. She was not afraid of wanting this. She had told herself in 4 years of careful management that the specific ache of wanting had been resolved by practicality. She understood now that she had simply been waiting for something worth the want. "I have very strong opinions about coffee," she said. "I know." His eyes held something warm and unhurried. "I'm counting on it." They were married in the spring, on a Saturday morning in April, in the garden of a house on Massachusetts Avenue that he had purchased in February. A house with enough room for a study where 2 people could sit across from each other and argue about Tocqueville, and a kitchen where coffee could be made properly, and windows that looked out on a garden where things grew in their own time. The ceremony was attended by 60 guests, which was small by Washington standards. Senator Aldrich was present and admitted afterward to feeling something he was reluctant to name. Mrs. Langley cried, to her own apparent surprise. The Langley children, who had been told 3 days before the wedding, asked Clara if they could still write to her, and she had said yes, of course, because she was not the kind of woman who stopped caring about things just because circumstances changed. The general smiled at the ceremony, openly in public for the duration of the proceedings. 3 separate newspapers noted this in their accounts of the event. He gave her gloves as a wedding gift, white, perfectly fitted, with a note in his precise hand. "You'll never need them to manage distance again. A.B." She wore them to the reception and took them off when they were alone. He noticed. He always noticed. They spent the evening in the garden as the guests departed, and the April air was cool and clear, and the city moved beyond the walls with its usual indifferent efficiency, and Clara Bennett stood beside her husband and felt the precise quality of something chosen freely, built from honest ground, held without performance. "You're thinking about something," he said. "I'm thinking about all the Thursday mornings," she said. "How carefully we moved." "We moved appropriately," he said. He found her hand, the bare one, no gloves. "Given the conditions." "Given the conditions," she agreed. He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles, the formal gesture made private. The thing that had once been appropriate distance, now entirely inadequate. He turned her hand over, to the palm, and held it there, his lips against the center. She felt it from her hand to her spine. "Arthur," she said. "Clara." "You can stop being restrained now," she said. "I know," he said against her hand. "I'm practicing." She laughed, a real one from the center, the kind she gave to real things. He laughed too, which was rarer, and which she had waited for, and which was worth every carefully managed month of waiting. The garden was full of spring in the April dark, and the house behind them glowed with warm light, and between them there was nothing managed, nothing performed, only two people who had chosen each other past the cost of it, past the room's opinion, past every careful architecture of a world that had tried to keep them in their respective positions. She had been for 4 years very good at being alone. She was better at this.